basis for which you should decide your behavioral conduct is its alignment with the eternal principles inherent in nature. Like the many laws of physics that remain constant across time, there exist unseen and unchangeable laws that decide what comes of individuals' actions. Just as we must discover the invisible laws of physics by the detectable outcomes of physical input upon objects, we must discover the invisible laws of behavior by the detectable results of any action. These laws are equal to all individuals, and there can never be a tipping of the scale that gives any individual or group more rights than any other individual or group. No law made by man, policy, or preference can remain valid if it violates this inherent natural law. Natural law, or what I like to call law with a capital L, is as follows. You have the right to your property, and most of all your body. No one can do anything with your property, and most of all your body, without your permission. Likewise, you cannot do anything with anyone else's property, and most of all their body, without their permission.
If another person tells me to cover my fucking mouth or tries to mind my own motherfucking health business, my own personal fucking health, and tells me what the fuck to do about it, I'm gonna swear to fucking God!
The National Center for Biotechnology Information conducted a randomized controlled trial in 2009 on surgical mask effectiveness to reduce common cold incidents among healthcare workers, finding face mask use was not demonstrated to provide benefit in terms of cold symptoms or getting colds, and that N95 masked healthcare workers were significantly more likely to experience headaches. Another study by Cambridge University in 2010 to test the usefulness of face masks to prevent the transmission of influenza virus found no benefit from wearing a mask in either healthcare workers or community members in households. Another set of studies by the Health Protection Agency in London, England, and the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control in Stockholm, Sweden in 2012 demonstrated in 17 eligible studies that there was no conclusive relationship between mask or respirator use and protection against influenza infection. Another highly respected study in the peer-reviewed Canadian Medical Association Journal identified 6 clinical studies finding no signs of significant difference between N95 respirators and surgical masks in associated risk of laboratory-confirmed respiratory infection, influenza-like illness, or reported workplace absenteeism. Another study involving 6 randomized control trials involving 9,171 participants by the Chinese Evidence-Based Medicine Center and West China School of Medicine at Sichuan University concluded there were no statistically significant differences in preventing laboratory-confirmed influenza, respiratory viral infections, respiratory infection, and influenza-like illness using N95 respirators and surgical masks. The World Health Organization itself, on June 5, 2020, published the following risks of using masks: self-contamination due to the manipulation of the mask by contaminated hands, possible development of facial skin lesions, irritant dermatitis or worsening acne, and a false sense of security, leading to less adherence to basic hygiene precautions.
You stupid, fucking useless fucks! They cover your fucking mouth with a cloth surgeon's mask is gonna help you with the fucking stealth airborne virus! You're a bunch of fucking scientific motherfucking delinquents!
Perhaps the greatest issue with widespread mandatory face coverings is the psychological effects on those with sensitive, developing minds, children. When you first enter this world, you are disoriented and struggling to gain footing. Your perception is essentially a chaotic swarm of confusion, whose protection of which must be relinquished to your guardians. When the adults responsible for your upbringing are interacting with you with blocked visual facial language cues replaced by open or closed beady eyes, you completely lose any proper example of nonverbal interaction. Be sure this absence of developmental experience will lead to trauma that needs to be healed later in life. On another whole level of child neglect and savage abuse is then forcing your child to cover their own face. I don't care what your excuse is or who told you to do it. Requiring the masking of your children is a heinous affront to the sacredness of childhood. If you can't defend your own child's right to show their face and breathe unperturbed, you shouldn't have been a parent in the first place and are an abomination of the crucial responsibility that is parenthood.
And all you fucking failures of fucking parents who force your fucking children to fucking muzzle themselves and cover their fucking nose and mouth in public are epic fucking colossal failures. You are literally complicit in fucking child abuse. You are teaching your fucking children to obey a massive fucking thug slave gang cult and their fucking orders to keep the fucking public submissive and the future generations in fucking chains.
Behind the trust in institutions causing Earth's current challenge is the illusion of the legitimacy of government. The term government itself, with an etymology meaning mind control, is a horrendous euphemism for what it really is, a massive violent gang. The foundational resource acquisition of this out-of-control gang of thugs is mandatory tribute at the threat of kidnapping and imprisonment, also euphemized as taxation. Because of the natural law that every individual has to decide what is done with their property and most of all their body, taxation is nothing but extortion and theft. This burden on all victims of government not only is a significant contributor to poverty and disparity, but when left to develop indefinitely is a threat to all free markets and economies. The economic consequences of forcing consensual businesses to close, often with no financial help from the governments forcing them to do so, are resulting in far more negative consequences than any current flu or virus, and can be guaranteed to eclipse the death count from suicides and violent conflicts over resources.
And all you fucking ignorant QAnon fucking pansies. I see you every fucking day in public, out in fucking public, covering your fucking face and mouth, talking shit to people like me who have fucking integrity, who are actually fucking supporting human rights. Where the fuck are you people? You say you're against child abuse. You say you're for fucking freedom. Bullshit!
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention published a review on mental health effects, harmful substance use, and suicidal ideation caused by the lockdown. The stats showed 40% of U.S. adults reporting struggling with anxiety, depression, and trauma-related disorder symptoms, as well as much as 11% seriously considering suicide. The 5,412 people surveyed are direct evidence of the need to abandon the violent institution of government. The only appropriate response to such a dangerous organization that any individual can make is to withdraw their participation. The proliferation of government is a slammed gas pedal in a vehicle heading straight to the edge of a cliff. Everything from holding a government position, benefiting from taxation, to casting a governmental vote is an attempt to become the driver of this doomed vehicle and push down the gas pedal harder, or even shift it into a higher gear. You cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that caused it to be so. All services that government has hijacked can not only be fulfilled by the free market, but can excel in ways no one thought was possible, lifting bureaucratic limitations and becoming susceptible to public review and organic improvement by voluntary participants.
And in the middle of this worldwide raping of everybody's rights and outright public humiliation of them, you actually seriously think there's a fucking debate about which fucking slave gang headmaster ruler should fucking continue to annihilate and destruct your every fucking meaningful internal truth. Every person who votes for a fucking president this fucking year is complicit in completely substantiating the continuation of fucking slavery of future generations and yourself and your family and your fucking friends. Donald Trump, Joe the pedo Biden, Mike Pence, and Kamala Harris are all megalomaniac psychopaths. These people are rotten vampires who would feed on your fucking family. They would feed on everything that's fucking good and suck it up. Because they don't give a shit about what's right. They just want power and control. And they're fucking psychotic.
The condition currently laid upon the common folk is one of widespread and constant duress. The institutions of humanity have gotten so far out of control that the forward progress of everyone is undeniably being held hostage from them. The only responsible response is one of courage and compassion, to become dissidents of the illusion of authority and reject the normalization of violence. With the masses disobeying the illegitimate mandates, edicts, and decrees of their rulers, a free and safe society can begin to shine on the horizon. The only requirement is to act on your own responsibility, to acknowledge your individuality, and become an example of action for the right and just. Every blade of grass starts with the root, and every root starts with a nourished seed. With consistency and determination, soon an abundant forest is grown.
If your docile stupor of a spiritual sleep can't see that the charade of taxation laws needs to be absolutely widely disobeyed to stop funding these fucking genocidal murderers, you need to wake the fuck up!